Hello and welcome. I'm Huangci, and I'm a pianist living in Germany and the US. It's my pleasure to be speaking with you today about the Chopin Concerto No. 1, one of my favorite pieces. A favorite not only for me, but of pianists and students everywhere. And it's a welcome addition in any concert hall and in many international piano competitions. We'll start with the first movement. I would like to first mention how important it is to go through the orchestra part, to read through the second piano. And this particular edition has a very nice arrangement, and one can learn just a lot from looking at the different harmonies, which we would sometimes just gloss over in the orchestra. The tutti is very long, so one has to be fully prepared when one is getting ready to start their opening theme. It's more than 4 minutes long, so we just have to mentally prepare. From the very first chord, it's a lot about the preparation, this upward motion, leading always with the pinky in the right hand. Here I use the thumb, sliding for a little bit more stability. And a very important thing to remember is when one starts a kind of softer phrase after fortissimo, you should give extra sound to the first couple of notes. And I take the F with the thumb here in the left hand, giving my right hand freedom to trill as I please. Going into the theme, I take the lower E with the right hand to avoid unnecessary movements in the left. Same here. Now this whole section, we begin a kind of interaction with the orchestra, which we will be following for the entire piece. A lot of times, the beats 3 going to 1 are doubled with our left hand and with the basses, or the bass line of the orchestra. And it's very important to always give an impulse with our left hand to conduct. It's much easier to follow this way. There are many transitions with a lot of tempo changes in the first movement of this concerto. And we have to always do it in a very convincing way, yet always be clear to the orchestra. And again, the trick of that is to always show the 3 to 1 motion. For me, I like to always get into the tempo one beat early so that the orchestra already knows what the tempo is going to be on the third beat of the measure before. For example, at bar 193, a lot of time, tempo. And we're already in the tempo. And again, this is the same trick in bar 202. And we're in the tempo. And the con fuoco, I will play slowly to show you a special hand movement that I'm using. When I go upwards, I'm leaning towards the pinky or the right side of my right hand. And when I go down, I lean more towards the index finger of my right hand. And each time, the hand stays stable and doesn't move in terms of changing the position. One practices this whole place like this, and when it's faster, now, in the next section, at 275, there's a danger of starting off a little bit too quickly. Don't get overexcited, because the real tempo that we're setting is for bar 253, risoluto. And we cannot be too fast there because there's a lot of thick textures coming in. Now, when I'm playing the risoluto, I get my hand into position in the last 16th of the third beat. Just being mentally ready to jump or to get into the position of the bigger chord is very important. And once you're aware of that, it works usually better. Many times in this concerto, one is leading with the left hand, but very few times is the left hand really the star. And starting from bar 291, we should really take the time to show how the left hand is weaving and creating all the ups and downs that makes this whole place sound so swelling. Really enjoy the feeling of the ring finger going over the left hand pinky sometimes, and enjoy the finger legato that one can create without pedal. In the development section, there is the moment at bar 391. I like to bring out the top notes a little bit off tempo, so it sounds like pearls coming down. And at the risoluto section in bar 408, this is a very, very long development section, and we have to prepare it, we have to plan it. It's a section which is repeated twice, and for me, the second time is much more intense in character. So the first time is a little bit more searching. I show a lot of inner voices. And this helps a lot with this like nervous atmosphere, this slightly like unsure searching mode. And when we get into the climax, around bar 448, I take some notes with the left hand. This is what I would say is the climax of this section. Here, left hand. And again. The whole point of that is to give your right hand a little bit of a breather, a little bit of a relaxant, because you get a bit tired in such a section. Starting in bar 474, it's another place where one can play with the inner voices, not only on the beat, also left hand, but a little bit on the off beats. And this really propels us into the triple forte, which is very unusual for Chopin. I'd like to also make a note of bar 485. This is a place where the piano is really going forward. There's a lot of momentum, but we have to pull back on the last beat of 485 because this is where the orchestra enters, and they're going to enter in exactly the tempo as the beginning, which will certainly be slower than what we're playing. So remember to pull the brakes in. I'll play the last two bars. And this is something you have to discuss with the conductor when you work with them. Now we have the section from bar 621, the agitato, the final dance, so to say. I always think of the thumb in the right hand as a little hammer coming from above and using the momentum from the force dropping down. So while the right hand is doing that, the left hand has to know exactly how many notes are in the trill. For me personally, I always play 7 notes. It's not about how many notes you can fit in this one beat. It's rather about how many notes can you fit in clearly. And I find that 7, it sounds fast, yet you are able to have the time for the clarity needed. And that goes on all the way. Now, at bar 661, I have a special fingering which I use. I'll play it slowly. The important thing to know here is that there are some bars where the orchestra doesn't play. For example, bar 662. And it's up to us to show the impulse on 1 so that they know when to come in exactly at bar 663. So it's not about giving the accent on that beat, but rather to know exactly which chord it is that is on 1. So everything can be in tempo, because this is not a place where you want to make rubatos and confuse the orchestra. Today we will speak about the second and third movement of the Chopin Concerto No. 1 in E minor, Opus 11. The second movement, known as Romance, which is a very fitting title because this movement is all about love and is played always with a beautiful cantabile sound. A picture that I always have in my mind when I play this is sitting under a big, beautiful tree, perhaps in late spring or summer, so it's a warm day, and thinking just about, great memories of loved ones. The tempo for such a piece should not be too slow. We should always give ourselves like a chance to have flexibility. For me, it's something like this. It always has to go a little bit forward. And one of the dangers about this movement, in my opinion, is that the orchestra and the soloists, they tend to wait for each other, particularly in the beginning of each bar. And this will ruin the forward momentum, unfortunately. So keep that in mind. Rubatos can be much longer or in a bigger picture than just one bar at a time. It could also be played around 2 bars. So 1 bar going forward, 1 bar taking time back. For example, from bar 39, we go a little bit forward. And this is a technique which one can use throughout this movement a little bit. There are many places where Chopin has a lot of figurations over just one beat or so, like 14 notes, 20 notes. And my trick for this is usually that the rubatos are either in the beginning of such a phrase or rather in the middle, but at the end that we give this little impulse or a little push to guide the orchestra back into the original tempo. For example, bar 49. And then back. So the last 5 notes of this figuration is more or less going towards the first beat of bar 50, and it gives the orchestra a little bit of time rather than them waiting and then having to come in suddenly. And this is again a technique which can be used, for example, in bars 54, in bars 58, the same thing. In the agitato section, starting in bar 63, this is a completely different color. It's no longer so peaceful, without worries. Suddenly we feel a little bit of tension. We feel some agitation, as the score indicates. And it's important to listen to the orchestra. It's exactly what we have to play together with in the left hand while the right hand is molding its way around. At bar 72, the theme is doubled by the alto. And I personally like to give special emphasis to this alto voice. It adds a much darker side of the sound, and it's a great contrast to the rest of the music. From bar 101, we are completely free for 3 bars, but these 3 bars could be a little bit like an eternity. Time stands still. I like to give special emphasis to the top notes, to the pinky in the right hand. To add just a little bit of extra shine to these notes, and it goes down, and it should kind of put people in a trance, preparing for the beautiful melody of the orchestra. And from bar 105, it is our turn to completely follow the orchestra. They are leading us, and we are providing just a warm carpet of sound. In places such as bar 111, it's as if that we are following the orchestra like we're following a singer. If there is someone playing a wood instrument or laser, it's our chance to completely breathe together with them. So it's all about listening. After this dreamy movement, the third movement, it's almost like an attacca, and it starts very suddenly. It's a surprise to all of us, and we need to get suddenly right away into this new energy. It's a dance. This is a Krakowiak, full of exuberance, and the opening theme, one can take a lot of time because we're alone without the orchestra. I'll play it quite slowly so that you can see one of my fingerings for the upper register. Important is that when the notes are repeated, that you change the finger. And also, I like to use a thumb on the grace note of F sharp. Once the orchestra comes in, we no longer have this like total freedom, but it's very important to use the left hand as an anchor to balance out. From bar 128, I like to think of each of these movements, like one bar, all of these figurations, these running triolins, to be just one movement, that the arm is guiding our hand in a way, that we feel the tension of the arm moving us up and down. In slow motion. As you see, I like to use the thumb in the left hand in bars 132 as well as in bars 136 to give myself just a little bit of extra time to make sure that this first beat will come in together with the orchestra and to really accent this forte. Starting from bars 212, there's a lot of interplay between the left and right hands, and it's almost like a conversation, a heated conversation, which gets more and more intense, and it's a moment that we can really show the left hand. Show the melody. And when the right hand comes in, practice it so that you only hear the runs between the hands. So it's getting more and more intense, and it culminates in bar 231, where I always like to really place the first note, almost as if it's in an accent, just to make sure that us and the orchestra, we find ourselves. There has to be checkpoints to find to make sure that nothing is getting too far ahead, and this is one of those moments. Because here, it's completely like clockwork going. There are a lot of moments in this concerto where we're running a lot, and there's a lot of scales up and down, and I think it's very important to always give an impulse on those bars where there is no orchestra playing, and we're just playing a run, and the orchestra comes in the next bar, to give them a sense of direction. For example, in bar 249, accent. Just to know where one is, then the orchestra also won't have to hesitate to know where is one exactly. A tricky place for me is from 260 because the right hand is not extremely comfortable in terms of the fingerings. And this is a place where we have to rely completely on the left hand to be together with the orchestra. And again, as I just mentioned, to also give a little impulse on those bars where it's just running and the orchestra might be confused as to where you are. I'll start playing at bar 268. Accent. Impulse. This is a very tricky place, and when you play it with an orchestra, it's going to take a couple rehearsals, but if you know where one is, this will already help a lot. From bar 256, there is again this hand motion, which I use when I practice leaning more towards the pinky going up, and then leaning more towards the index or the thumb going down, keeping the hand more or less in the same position and very stable, and not moving too much in terms of the wrist. So starting from bar 355. So you're keeping your wrist almost always at the same level and just keep turning your hand a little bit in terms of the overall direction where it's leaning. Another bar, 411, is another one of those places to at least give an impulse on one so that the orchestra knows where you are, because they might assume that you're doing an cello rondo, and it always has to land together on bar 412. 410 is like this. Impulse. These are just important points to have in the back of your mind. From 456, the party really begins, and it's the place where you should really go all out, take risks. And really think of it as a dance, and don't think too much that, oh, should I take that risk and play so fast? What if I hit the wrong note at the top? I think it's more important to have the right atmosphere and to use the left hand as the anchor to make sure that you're not getting ahead of yourself. A final thing with orchestra, just to be fully together, is from bar 488. This is more like a, it says velocity, and we're getting more and more towards the end. We're running towards the end. And it's very important, again, to give the impulses on bar 490 and in bar 494 on 1, just so that the orchestra can even find where you are. From bar 512, I will play slowly because there's a specific fingering in bar 515, which I do. And what I do is I put a 5 on the top G sharp in bar 515, so as to give it this extra time, this extra oomph, which we need to get into the fortissimo and closing off this fantastic concerto.